Hey y'all, I'm Rylan. Welcome to my channel. I'm here today to give y'all a rapid wrap-up of all the books that I read in January. The first month of 2025 flew by so quickly, but I was able to read 12 books during the month, totaling 3,919 pages. I am very excited about this number, especially as I gear up to submit my thesis in March/early April. I think my reading will slow down dramatically for a couple months this spring, but for right now, I'm keeping up a very consistent habit of reading and making time to read every day. I'm hoping to take advantage of that for as long as I possibly can as I get ready to finish up my master's degree. But I'm here today to give y'all a very rapid wrap-up of all 12 books that I read this past month. I do try to stick to the notebook where I write down all my wrap-ups and give a quick sentence synopsis and 3 or 4 bullet points about the book. So ideally we get through all 12 books in a very timely manner. I read 9 physical books and 3 NetGalley arcs in January, and 6 of those had audiobook accompaniments, which I always very much appreciate because it allows me to multitask while getting more books done every month. So I'll go ahead and dive into the 12 books that I read in the month of January, pretty much following a chronological order where I read them, and I'll give y'all quick synopsis, a couple of general thoughts about the book, and I'll have content warnings for all of these books in the description down below if you would like to check those out. I did also, before we dive into these 12 books, manage to read every single book that I put on my January TBR. So if you watch my January TBR video, I did read every book that I talked about in the video, which I am very excited about, and it felt very nice to be able to open up to my January TBR page and see all of the boxes checked. So very excited about that, and hopefully I can keep up that momentum in February with my newest TBR. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and dive into the 12 books that I read in the month of January. First up, I read Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. This is the author's newest release about an author whose wife goes missing, and he decides to go to an island to try and kind of get his head cleared and write his next book, and weird things start happening on the island. I gave this book 5 stars, definitely my new favorite by the author. The prose in this book was just so beautiful, and there were so many quotable moments, which seems kind of weird because it is a thriller, but I feel like Alice Feeney does such a great job of writing very quotable one-liners that just kind of tug at your heart, and I loved that. Also, this book had very short chapters, which meant lots of cliffhangers and suspenseful moments when you felt like you had to turn the next page to find out what was going to happen next. Next up, I read House of Glass by Sarah Buchanan. This is a book about a woman who is tasked with helping this young girl who is stuck in the middle of parents who are divorcing, and she's trying to figure out which parent the girl should end up with, and is trying to navigate the secrets surrounding this murder that happened at her house, and trying to figure out the truth behind that, if the daughter might have been involved, because it kind of seems like she could have been. I gave this book 4 stars. It did have a pretty slow start for me, but I was very much enraptured with the plot once I got into the book. We see a lot of past trauma that is brought back into the present, both with our main character and with the young girl, and just trauma that she has faced in the home that she's living in. And there was a very big plot twist that completely surprised me. I was not expecting it, but I really liked it. So 4 stars this one. Would read more by the author. I have read several books by Sarah Buchanan and Greer Hendricks as an author duo, but have not loved one of the other books that I read by this author as a single writer last year or 2 years ago, but really liked this one. I also read The Secret Year by Jennifer R. Hubbard. This was a NetGalley arc that released in January. I think it was actually a re-release, so the book had been out for a couple years but was redone when a publisher picked it up. This is about a boy who is struggling with grief after his secret girlfriend a year before died in a car accident, and he received a journal where she wrote letters to him. I gave this book 2 stars. Unfortunately, I did not end up loving it. The writing and plot felt very repetitive, and it was very hard to connect to the characters because I just felt like I was reading the same thing over and over again, and I just didn't feel like there's any change of pace or any growth or any really thing that happens in the plot that much, which made it hard to connect with the story that was happening on the page. But it was a very quick read. It was barely 200 pages, so I read it in like 2 days. Next, I read The Kingmaker, which was the January Mending Hearts book club pick. We read both The Kingmaker and The Rebel King, the first book being The Kingmaker. This is a duet about Lennox and Maxim. Lennox is a young girl at the beginning of this series who is fighting for the rights of indigenous land and people who are trying to destroy that land, and she ends up meeting Maxim when she's a teenager, and years pass in the course of these two books as things happen to them, and they are together and then they're apart, and they're both very driven people who are trying to make the world a better place and are very passionate about their jobs and how they can help the people around them. So there is a lot that happens in these two books. I don't want to say too much because the second book is a direct cliffhanger from book one, but if you're looking for a very passionate and steamy romance, would recommend this duet. I love both of these characters. They were both very hardworking, very driven, very passionate about their jobs and each other, and I loved watching them face their flaws and face their fears to be together in the end. There's a lot that happens to these two characters, especially to Lennox at the end of the first book, but I really enjoyed watching them grow and seeing their story unfold. I gave The Kingmaker 4 stars and The Rebel King 4 stars, so 2 very strong reads, and I would highly recommend checking out this duet. The light coming through the window is really bugging me, so I'm gonna try to go fix it, and if not, we're just gonna keep rolling with how the camera is right now. If I move y'all up, does that help with the camera lighting? Okay, kind of, yes, we're gonna roll with it for right now. And of course my battery is dying, so let me go change that now. I guess that was y'all's intermission because a lot happened in the last 2 minutes in terms of lighting and battery, and I just dropped a hat on the floor. Let's keep going though. I'm almost done already. After reading The Kingmaker, or All the King's Men duology by Kennedy Ryan, I read The Courting of Bristol Keats by Mary E. Pearson. This is a very lush and gothic fantasy romance about our main character Bristol, who makes a deal with the world of the Fae to help them if they help her, and she ends up finding herself in this world of Elfame, I think is the name of it, and falling in love with the king of the Fae. So I was very hesitant with this one in the beginning, but it did grow on me the further I got into the book. I was really craving a romantasy after reading Phantasma last year, and this one did end up doing that job for me in the end. I do want to know what happens in the sequel, and I have no idea when it's coming out, but if you're looking for a very beautiful world, it was very intriguing to me. I love the descriptions of the world and slow burn romance and a not cliffhanger ending, but enough to make you want to know what happens in the duology, in the duet of the book. Would recommend checking this one out. We will have to wait for book 2, but I'm willing to wait. I don't think I'll need to reread the first book before reading the second one, at least at this point, and I'm looking forward to continuing these character stories in this world and seeing what ends up happening. I gave this book 4 stars. I also finished Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. This one had been on my TBR for a very long time, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. Unfortunately, this is a book about a woman named Irina who is a very possessive and obsessive person, and she is a photographer and does more sensuous, I guess, photographs of men specifically, and she ends up going through this spiral and struggling with her mentality as she is putting together this exhibition for a show that she has been invited to. I think that's a good way to explain the book. It was kind of hard for me to read at times. It was very horrendous, and also I struggled to like Irina because she has a lot of red flags, and I'm very concerned for her as a character, but I think this book is just very graphic and very body horror-esque at times and very explicit that I had a hard time enjoying it and just thought that it was a harder read for me in the end. So I gave it 2 stars. It's definitely an interesting book though. It just wasn't one for me personally. I read another NetGalley arc called The Last to Know by Jo Furness. This is a book about our main character Rose, who moves into her husband's childhood home and weird things starts happening and she finds out the truth about her husband's family and secrets that they might be keeping and what the town believes about them. I gave this book 2 stars. I did not enjoy it unfortunately, but I did get my oldest NetGalley arc taken off my shelf because I read it, which was great. There were a lot of different plot directions that this book took and some of them I didn't really think were necessary. It's also very slow and I personally did not care too much about the characters, so not for me unfortunately, but it is on Kindle Unlimited if you're interested in checking it out, and I do like the cover. It's very pretty. After that, I read The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Call. This book and several others that I've mentioned in this video should be in a snow day reading vlog from a couple weeks ago when Tennessee got a good little snowfall and we all had the day off work and school. So that was very nice. But this is a reimagining of The Little Mermaid after The Little Mermaid ends up killing her husband, the prince, and the journey that the mermaid takes and what happens in that journey. I gave this book 2 stars also. The plot was super fascinating. However, I didn't understand half of the words that were being said and how they're being said. So I just felt like I had to reread sections a lot because I didn't know what was going on. There's some very interesting commentary in this one though, and a very unique premise. I just couldn't understand the prose, so that's why I didn't end up liking this one, unfortunately. We're almost done, y'all. I've got 3 books left. 2 of them I have the physical copies for at my boyfriend's apartment, but so I don't have them here, so I'll just put a picture up on the screen. But next, I read Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose, and as somebody who has read 3 or 4 books by this author and have not liked any of them, I was hesitant about this one, but I pulled it out of a little free library, and it was the Walmart exclusive edition, I think, and it's very pretty. So I was like, I'll give this author one more chance to impress me, and she did. So I'm very excited about that. But this is a thriller about 3 siblings who discover a terrible family secret after their mother passes away. And the siblings are estranged, so everything's kind of uncomfortable, and they're learning a lot of things about each other and something that happened about 20 years before. I gave this book 3.75 stars. I did end up really enjoying it. It is by far my favorite book by the author. It was very quick and engaging. The plot twist didn't really shock me, but it was enough where I was like, all right, it was a good twist and I could appreciate the direction that the story took because of it. I also read another very old NetGalley arc, which was The Guest Room by Rana Halsall. This book is also on Kindle Unlimited. I've had this on my shelf since probably late 2020, and this is another thriller about a woman who finds weird things going on in her house, and she ends up taking this struggling homeless boy from the nonprofit that she works at into her home, and when he moves in, even weirder things start happening. She is a newly divorced woman and her kids are grown up, and things are just not right in her household. Very slow burn. I wasn't quite sure I was gonna like this one because it was super slow and I felt like nothing that exciting was happening until we hit the plot twist, and the last 30% of this book was crazy in the best way, and I thought that the unexpected twist really ended up pulling the book together for me in the end, because if it hadn't been for that, I probably would have thought that this book was really slow and not really much of a mystery or thriller, but it worked out for me in the end. So 3.5 stars to that one. Kind of an underrated book, I feel like, but I really enjoyed it and would recommend checking it out. And then finally, for my thesis research, I read Mindhunter. This is a true crime book about a retired FBI agent in the serial crimes unit, and I read a lot about serial killers and the marks of a serial killer a lot of times, and how authorities find these people and how they classify them and profile them and things like that. I'm not rating this book, but I did find that it was very interesting, especially as someone who is doing creative fiction in a similar realm and having to do character sketches for several different people, and I enjoyed it. I did like it a lot. I'm not going to give an official rating, but if you like true crime, I would recommend checking this book out. It is newly, I think, a series on Netflix, so I haven't seen it yet, but maybe that's a good choice if you're looking for a true crime documentary series. So I did have a good time with it, as good of a time that I could have doing research personally, but I did like it, and it definitely kept me engaged and gave me a lot of good information in regard to my own writing, which I of course appreciate. Those are the 12 books that I read in the month of January. I think I did a pretty good job of sticking on course, and I'm very excited about that. If you read any great books in the month of January, feel free to comment them below and let me know what they were. I'd love to add more books to my TBR. Otherwise, that's all that I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.